This is again Baron with the National Association of Black and White Men Together. As you watch this video, may I ask you please to subscribe, to like us, and to comment. We hope you enjoy it. The press and the president. If Donald Trump stands for election in 2024 and loses narrowly but then plunges the United States into a constitutional crisis, will the news media have been at fault? That's the question. This view that media neutrality has a tacit pro-Trump tilt is associated with many critics. The Washington Post Dana Milbank, in a study using algorithms that give weight to certain adjectives based on their placement in the story, he reported that after a honeymoon, President Biden's media coverage has lately been a negative, or even more negative than Trump's coverage through most of 2020. Well, given the perils of a Trump resurgence, Milbank went on to say and warn, this negativity means that my colleagues in the media are serving as accessories to the murder of democracy. And so, this point of view is wrong and could feed a polarization, and it could make crises in our system much more likely. And so, take the situation as Georgia heads for a gubernatorial election. A new poll of likely Republican voters suggests that former President Trump's endorsement could sway the primary. Wow, think of that. An initial survey of 500 Georgians found that 41% would vote for the incumbent Brian Kemp, while 22% favored former Senator David Perdue, who lost re-election to Senator Jon Ossoff earlier in this year. Then respondents were informed that Trump had endorsed Perdue. After that, many potential voters changed their tune. So the knowledge of Trump's endorsement tied Kemp and Perdue at 34%. Brian Kemp, the conservative incumbent, who was famously hated by President Donald Trump. Trump is angry, very angry at Kemp for fulfilling his obligations of Georgia's governor instead of going along with the, quote, stop the steal charade. As a result, the Georgia governor's primary will effectively be a referendum, not just on Trump's general power in the GOP, but also his specific ability to bully Republican elected officials in the event of a contested election. The media has an obligation to cover the campaign with that reality in mind, and to stress the reasons this matchup is happening and its dangerous implications for how Republican officials might respond to a future attempt to overturn a presidential vote. Suppose, for instance, that midway through the race, some corruption case implicates Kemp. Should Georgia's journalists decline to cover it because a Kemp loss would empower anti-democratic forces? Should reporters highlight those stories knowing that they may help Perdue win? Or should they bury them because democracy itself is in the balance? The answers to these questions, and maybe more, are principled, and their answers reflecting a journalistic obligation to the truth that cannot be set aside for the sake of certain political results. However desirable for democracy those results may seem to be. There were ways in which the national news media helped Trump in his path through the Republican primaries in 2016 by giving him constant celebrity level hype at every other candidate's expense. After his November victory, much of the press adopted exactly the self-understanding that its critics are still urging, positioning itself as the guardians of democracy, a moral arbiter, as it were, rather than a neutral referee, and they determined to make Trump's abnormal qualities and authoritarian tendencies the central story of his presidency. The results of this mindset, unfortunately, included a lot of not particularly great journalism, in my view. This instilled a media industry-wide fear throughout the 2020 election of any kind of coverage that might give maybe too much aid and comfort to Trumpism, whether it touched on the summertime riots or Hunter Biden's alleged business dealings. Trump did not lose overwhelmingly, as you remember, all of you. He gained voters in places the establishment did not expect, and he was able to turn media hostility to his advantage in his quest to keep control of his party, even in defeat. This points to the essential problem with the ideas that just a little less media neutrality, maybe a little more overt alarmism will put Trumpism in its place. Well, you can't suppress a populist insurgency just by rallying the establishment if suspicion of the establishment is precisely what is generating support for populism in the first place. Instead, you need to tell the truth about populism's dangers while convincing skeptical readers and maybe even voters that you can be trusted, and to describe reality in full. So, back to the Milbank negativity algorithms. Analysts like Nate Silver, he's on 538 podcast, have doubted the algorithms. It turns negative coverage reflected more stalwart opposition. The president who opposed is being terrible again, while in Biden's case, the negativity often coexists with sympathy. The president we support is blowing it, and we're upset. But still, there's no question that the current administration's coverage has been pretty grim of late. You all know that, but it's turned grim for reasons that an objective and serious press corps would need to really acknowledge in order to have any credibility at all. A president who ran on restoring normalcy is dealing with a pandemic that stubbornly refuses to depart rising inflation that his own White House didn't predict. In addition, a border crossing crisis that was likewise unanticipated, also increasing military bellicosity from our major adversaries, and then stubbornly high homicide rates in liberal cities. It's a party that just lost a critical governor's race and stalled a legislative agenda. Biden's situation will surely improve, but a news media charged with describing reality would accomplish absolutely nothing for the country if it tried to bury all of these problems under headlines that were always and only about Trump. Remember that Terry McAuliffe lost to Glenn Youngkin. He was a Republican financier in the Virginia governor's race a year before after Biden carried Virginia by 10 points. It seems better to treat negative coverage as an example of the press living up to its primary mission, that is, the accurate description of reality, which is still the place where the Biden needs a better strategy if they hope to keep the country on their side. The source for this for the New York Times. This is Ken Barron with the National Association of Black and White Men Together. Thanking you. Please subscribe to us on Facebook and YouTube. Our website is nabwmt.org. And we thank you once again for listening.